US President Donald Trump's renewing attacks on the World Health Organization, accusing it of covering up China's failure to contain the coronavirus. The Chinese government rejects the allegations, saying it has been transparent and responsible in sharing information. Nevertheless, in a letter sent to the WHO and posted on social media, Trump says he will cut its funding permanently and pull the US out of the organization unless it can demonstrate independence from China within 30 days.
The United States pays them $450 million a year. China pays them $38 million a year. And they're a puppet of China. They're China-centric, to put it nicer, but they're a puppet of China.
His warning comes a day after the WHO said it would evaluate its role in the global pandemic.
I will initiate an independent evaluation at the earliest appropriate moment to review experience gained and lessons learned and to make recommendations to improve national and global pandemic preparedness and response. But one thing is abundantly clear: the world must never be the same.
Washington is also preparing to oppose a WHO resolution to let poorer countries ignore patents to get coronavirus vaccines or other medications. Beijing, meanwhile, is pledging $2 billion to help other countries fight the pandemic and says any vaccine it develops will be shared with all other countries.
When developed and available for use, China's coronavirus vaccine will be made a global public good. This will be China's contribution to ensure vaccine accessibility and affordability in developing countries.
Still, the exit of its largest donor could be debilitating for the WHO and for the fight against future pandemics. Mobin Nasir, TRT World.
Well, for more on this, Timothy McBride joins us live now from Washington, D.C. He's co-director at the Center for Health Economics and Policy at Washington University. Good to have you on the program, Timothy. Now, firstly, let's look at this issue of funding. We know the US is the top contributor to the WHO, but how crucial would a US shortfall be to the organization?
Oh, it would be quite crucial. The U.S. gives, in the last couple of years, almost $1 billion to the WHO, much of it a voluntary contribution, some of it not required. So it would be a big hit to the WHO.
And how would it affect its activities?
Well, in a situation like a global pandemic like this, and, WHO is designed to deal with things like infectious disease, where it's definitely a world issue, and we need to see it that way. And so what we certainly have learned from COVID-19 is that we can't be isolated in the U.S. We have to think about this as a global issue. So we need an organization like WHO.
Okay. Now, for better or worse, US President Donald Trump has really raised the issue of the WHO's independence. Donald Trump says the organization appears to be pandering, for want of a better word, to Beijing. And there are examples that other people have cited as well, including the refusal for the WHO to accept Taiwan as a member, also the refusal to accept Taiwan as a delegate at the recent WHA conference in Geneva and held virtually around the world. I mean, how true are those claims that perhaps there is a bit of pro-China bias there?
Well, I think what we're seeing is a battle between the U.S. and China that's about more than just the pandemic and the issues that you described. I think it's also about domestic politics that I think Trump needs to gin up, someone to blame for what's going on in the U.S. There is some grain of truth in what they say. I mean, I've been to China many times, and they are a secretive regime, and nobody responded perfectly to this pandemic. But I think what the president said is not entirely accurate about what China has done or not done either. So, and we've made our share of mistakes as well.
Now, when Donald Trump first suspended payments to the WHO in April, China said that it was willing to perhaps stump up more cash for the organisation. I'm wondering, what is the relationship between money and influence in the WHO? Does whoever contributes the most money have sway in the organisation?
Well, I'm an economist, so I would say that that's probably got to be the case. Money does matter, and it's in these global organizations, and the WHO dates back to the starting of the UN, 1948 or so. So, the larger countries have a lot of influence. There's no doubt about that. In the U.S. and China's really, it's become clear in the last 10 or 15 years that China's a major power trying to fight its way towards the top with the U.S. So, they do have a strong influence on the WHO and other global organizations, and they have 1 billion people, so it's not a big surprise.
Now, separate to what Donald Trump has been saying, others have also pointed to some missteps that happened at the hands of the WHO earlier on in the pandemic, including the WHO's acceptance of Chinese assertions that there was no human-to-human transmission of the coronavirus. We also now know that authorities in China did attempt to silence whistleblowers in Wuhan who were trying to warn people of the coronavirus. Do you believe that China has a case to answer here?
I think there are questions to answer about that. I think that, again, I mentioned that China can be secretive at times, and it seems like they were secretive about this. To its defense, I think they didn't really know exactly how bad this was either. And earlier on, the president praised them for what they're doing. I mean, I looked early on at what China's response to this was locally, and they clamped down on stay at home long before we did. But I think a lot of what the president's complaining about was probably pretty much resolved by January, mid-January, late January. So by the end of January, we knew even China was admitting how big the problem was. And we still were pretty slow here in responding after that.
Okay, Timothy McBride from the Centre for Health, Economics and Policy, thank you so much for joining us on the program.